If you have spent years in clinical practice and now you've moved into a leadership position, especially at the executive level, I need to tell you something that nobody told me, and it would have changed everything if they had told me this. My name is Diane Gudmundson, and I am a healthcare leadership architect, and I work with senior healthcare leaders all over the world who are trying to figure out why the same problems keep coming back no matter what they try. And before any of that, I was a clinician for many years, and then I built my own mobile clinic. And so I loaded my RAV4 and I drove to the patients instead of waiting for them to come to me. It was my absolute dream. It was my mission, and it nearly broke me. Not because I was in the wrong field, and certainly not because I didn't care enough, but because I was doing something that I see senior healthcare leaders do every single day, and nobody ever nobody ever describes it in a way that you can understand. And what I was doing is I was running the wrong engine for the role I was in. And today I want to explain exactly what I mean by that, because if you came up through clinical practice, so if nursing or medicine or allied health is just part of who you are, and now you're sitting in a leadership chair, what I'm about to share is going to land somewhere probably very strongly. So let's go. So I want you to imagine this. You have a kid, and that kid grows up playing hockey their whole life. They are incredible at the game. They're fast, they're aggressive, they go for that puck and they take up space. They don't wait for people to pass to them, they just go get it themselves. So this kid gets really good at hockey. So now imagine that same kid gets recruited to play basketball. We have the same kid, same athletic ability, same work ethic, and the same desire to win, but the sport is completely different. In basketball, if you run with the ball, nobody passed you, you get called for traveling. If you take up too much space, you foul out. If you try to do everything yourself, your team falls apart. The skills are not just different. In some ways, they are the complete opposite. So here's the thing. Clinical practice is like hockey, and leadership is like basketball. In clinical practice, you're rewarded for certainty, for having the answer quick, for acting alone when you need to because the patient in front of you cannot wait for a committee decision, for carrying more than your share because people's lives depend on it. And over years and years and years of doing that, it gets programmed or even baked into you. It's not just what you do, it becomes who you are. You are the one who figures it out, the one who holds it all together, and the one who doesn't drop the ball. And then you step into leadership. And the role needs the opposite of almost everything that made you a great clinician. So leadership needs you to sit with uncertainty instead of resolving it fast, to hand things to other people instead of just doing them yourself, to let your team figure things out even when you could figure it out faster. And you need to lead through trust and relationship, not just your own personal competence. So this is not a small adjustment. It is like that hockey player trying to play basketball and wondering why all of their best moves keep getting them fouled out. And the hardest part is that nobody tells you that the rules have changed. They just hand you the title and wait to see what happens. So I want to tell you what happened to me, because this is not theory. I lived this. When I was running my mobile clinic, NP on Wheels, I was the chief nurse practitioner and the CEO, which sounds impressive, and it was, until 3 of my nurse practitioners left in quick succession, and I absorbed all of their caseloads. And then guess what? I was running 12 to 14-hour days, 7 days a week. I was having fun. I kept going because my patients needed me, because people trusted me, because I had always been the dependable one, the strong one, the one who never dropped the ball. My legs started feeling heavy, driving between those visits. My thoughts went foggy at night, and sometimes my heart raced when I tried to sleep, and I still pushed because stopping felt like failing. And so here's what I did not understand at the time. I was not failing at leadership. I was succeeding at the wrong thing. Every single skill that had made me an exceptional clinician was now working against me as a leader. The carrying, the self-sufficiency, the certainty, the doing it myself because it was faster and I knew I could. So I was applying hockey skills to a basketball game, and I was running myself and my whole organization into the ground at the same time. So this is two things depleted by one pattern. So that is what eventually sent me back to school. I did an MBA in healthcare leadership, and it wasn't because I failed, but because I paused and paid close attention, and I saw that something structural was wrong, and I wanted to understand what it was. So now I want to talk about something that almost nobody talks about in leadership development. And I need you to stay with me here because this one is important. Think about a kid. Maybe a kid who grew up in a home where things were a little unpredictable, or where something like love felt like something you had to earn, or where being helpful was the only way to feel safe, or where showing weakness was not really allowed. So what does that kid learn? Very early on, they learn, if I keep giving, if I stay useful, if I make myself indispensable, I will be okay. That kid grows up and goes into healthcare, and they find a home there. Because healthcare rewards exactly that pattern. The person who cannot stop giving becomes the most dedicated clinician. The person who needs to feel useful shows up for every extra shift. The person who learned that their worth has to be earned works harder than anyone else in the room. And so from the outside, it looks like pure dedication. In a lot of ways, it is. But underneath, running quietly in the background, is something much older than the job. It's a belief that says, I have to keep carrying or something important will be taken from me. And so here's what happens when that person now steps into leadership. And it becomes even more prominent the higher the level of the leadership. So if you move into more of the executive roles. In clinical practice, the work keeps that belief covered. There's always something useful to do, always somebody who needs you. The pattern and the purpose line up perfectly, and nobody, including you, can see where one ends and the other begins. But when you get into leadership, that pulls the cover off, because leadership does not reward constant carrying. It actually punishes it. A leader who cannot stop doing becomes the bottleneck. A leader who has to have all the answers creates a team that stops thinking for themselves. A leader who carries everything alone builds a system that depends on one person's endurance, theirs, to hold it together. And that's not sustainable. We all know that. But here's what's harder to see. The leader's not doing these things because they lack skills. They're doing these things because of something they believe, often without knowing they believe it, about what they have to do to be enough. So let me give you some examples so that you can see if any of these sink in or land for you. The leader who over-explains every decision in the meeting, and not because they're bad at communicating, but because somewhere inside they still need people to see that they are competent, that they somehow earned their position. Next, the leader who cannot truly delegate, not because they don't trust their team, but because letting go feels like losing control, and losing control feels like failing. And failing feels dangerous in a way that goes way back. Next, the leader who works twice as hard as everyone else and quietly feels resentful that nobody seems to notice or appreciate it. And this isn't because they're selfish, but because they're exhausted from carrying things that were never meant to be carried alone. Next, the leader who says yes to everything, because saying no has always felt dangerous. Now, none of these leaders think that they have an old wound running their leadership. They think they have a good work ethic. They think, I have high standards. They think, I just care more than other people. And they are right that they care, but the caring somehow got tangled up a long time ago with something that was never about the job. And until you can see that and see it clearly, it will keep running the show. Okay, so there is a third thing that happens when clinicians cross into leadership. And this one may be the most straightforward. The pressure goes way up and the support goes way down. As a clinician, you have structure, you have a defined role, you have protocols, you have a team right beside you, you know your scope, there are edges to your job. As a healthcare leader, you have ambiguity, you have politics, you have competing demands from above you and below you and beside you. You have a board looking at your numbers and a team looking to you for safety and a system that is underfunded and understaffed and asking you to hold it all together anyway. And because your whole clinical career, you learned to carry things alone and make it look easy, so then you do. And the system figures that out very quickly. It learns who will absorb all of the extra, and it gives them all of the extra, not because it's fair, because it works. At least it works for a while. So here's what I want you to hear now. After I stepped back, after I did the deeper work on understanding my own patterns, where they came from, how they were showing up in my leadership, I applied what I had learned in a directorship contract, and the difference was absolutely dramatic. Not just in the outcomes, but how it felt in my body every single day at work. For the first time in my leadership career, I felt ease. I felt like I was in flow. So do you know what flow feels like? It is when you're doing something and it's not exactly effortless, but the effort feels right, like as if you're moving with something instead of against it. And that is what it felt like to lead from a different place. And I stopped being the ceiling of my team. I became the ground under their feet instead, the condition under which they could rise. When I stopped absorbing everything, the team started owning things. When I stopped having all the answers, they brought better questions. When I got more stable inside of me, all of the meetings and all the environments around me got more stable as well. The workplace was like the laboratory, and then the output or the team's behavior was the data. and my own self-awareness was the instrument that was playing. And what the data showed me was this: the patterns I had carried from clinical practice, the ones that felt like strength, were draining me and the system I was leading at the same time. So again, two things depleted by this one pattern. And so when I changed the pattern, both things got better at the same time as well. So I want to make sure I'm being really clear about something, because I think this is where a lot of people stop listening. They hear stories like mine and they think, oh, this is just a burnout story. And then they tune out because they don't feel burned out. They feel fine. They're functioning, they're performing, they're getting results. So let me say this in a different way. Imagine you have a car, and that car runs on diesel, but every day you fill it with regular gasoline. At first, it might run kind of, it's rough, but it moves, and you take it to get serviced and they tune it up and it helps a little, but it keeps running rough. And slowly and very slowly, it costs more and more to keep it going. So the problem is not the car. The car is a perfectly good car. The problem is what you are putting into it. So no amount of tuning will fix a diesel engine running on gasoline. So what it needs is the right fuel. The clinician skills, the certainty, the self-sufficiency, the carrying, the needing to prove competence, that's gasoline. But you're now operating with a diesel engine. You're in a leadership role, and leadership runs on completely different fuel. It runs on self-awareness, on the ability to sit with that uncertainty, on the willingness to distribute instead of absorb, and on knowing who you are under pressure, not who you perform to be, but who you actually are when things get hard. And you do not build that by working harder. You build it by looking at something most leaders have been never asked to look at, which is the roots. So here's what I mean by roots. Every single one of us came into our leadership role carrying things we picked up long before we had a title. Beliefs about our worth, beliefs about what happens if we show uncertainty, beliefs about whether we're allowed to rest, beliefs about what we have to do to be enough. Those beliefs are the roots. And here's what roots do. Underground, where you cannot see them, they shape everything above ground. The tree that looks strong from the outside, the branches that spread wide, the leaves that everyone admires. All of it is fed by what's happening underground. If the roots are healthy, the tree is healthy. If the roots are tangled up in something old and unexamined, the tree will keep struggling no matter how much water you pour on the leaves. You can pour all the water you want, new initiatives, better processes, communication training, accountability frameworks. But if you have not looked at the roots, the same patterns will keep coming back. Because roots don't care about your strategy. They just keep doing what they've always done. You cannot rise from roots that you have not examined. The identity and regulation layers, who you believe you are under pressure, and what you do with that in real time, those are the two deepest roots of all. The ones that feed everything else, the ones that nobody in traditional leadership development ever asks you to look at. So here's what I want to leave you. If you came up through clinical practice and now you lead people, you're not broken. You're not failing. And it's not that you're not the wrong person for the role. You're running the wrong fuel. And the good news is this is completely fixable. once you see it clearly. I wrote a book called Rooted to Rise. Everything I've talked about today goes much deeper in that book. The framework that explains exactly how your identity as a leader cascades into everything your team produces, the patterns to look for, and the tools to start changing them. You can find it on LinkedIn, and I will also give you the link in the description below. And I would love to know in the comments right now, what landed for you today? What did you recognize in yourself? Was it the hockey and basketball thing? Was it the diesel engine? Or was it one of those examples that made you think, oh my gosh, yes, that one is me? And I can tell you that I have experienced all of these, so I'm speaking from experience. So tell me your thoughts in the comments, because your insight is not just useful for you. It will help someone else watching this to realize that they are not alone. And I'll be back with more about this. And in the meantime, take good care of the leader that you are.